Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, and today we're having a super interesting conversation with Margaret de Bruyn, who is here with me. You're going to hear some of the really interesting overlaps that we have in our histories and our stories that it's going to make all kinds of sense in just a few minutes here. She actually has over 25 years of experience in corporate leadership, in entrepreneurship, and personal coaching. And she specializes in really helping professional women who are over 35 unlock their potential. She holds a master's degree in industrial organizational psychology from Columbia University. She's built multiple successful businesses, and now she really empowers women through her coaching. So, Margaret, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited for this conversation, and I would love for you to introduce yourself a little further and tell us a little bit of the story of who you are, how you came to be where you're at right now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me on here. Yeah, so I kind of probably did a lot of the same journey that many women did. And starting out in corporate America, and you kind of do different things. Mine probably was a little bit more of a varied experience. I think I did the traditional thing of like I got with a company and I stayed with it for many years. And I really started out with, back then I'm old enough to say we used to call it Mother Merrill at Merrill Lynch. And then went into banking. And then from there, my life took kind of a turn at one point when my father passed away. So I ended up taking over a business that was in the produce business, which I had had experience in the past, but it had been a long time, and it was not a female-friendly business, which I thought I was ready for after all my years of Merrill Lynch. However, I will say banking softened me up. So it was something that I learned an immense amount doing. I also, one of my biggest takeaways from that was don't do anything that is not your passion.
Mm,
Don't do anything that is not your passion because you will eventually start hating it and you'll want to leave. So why ever get there to begin with? And then from there, I really started the coaching and then consulting, then started my own, couple of businesses and, had fun building franchising and all kinds of things like that. That brings me today to a place where now I just really love investing my energy and time in women and helping coaching women to be their best selves and thrive.
mm. Yeah, and the place where, if people caught that, you mentioned being at Merrill Lynch, that being your first job out of college, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, so it was my first job. So I was kind of blessed, I guess, in a way you can say it. I grew up in a family business. However, it was not a mom and pop business. It was when I was a kid in high school and college working for it, it was a $150 million business. It was on three continents. And so I, very young, was thrown into the business. So at the age of 15, I was given my first seasonal division of the company to
Oh,
run
wow.
in West Texas. So I started out young in it and then I left it. And part of why I left was before I went to grad school, I wanted to go work for somebody else, but I wanted to work in a bigger company. I wanted to experience corporate life on a bigger scale.
Interesting. And the thing that you spoke about in your intro there that we're actually going to dive in a little bit more on is that piece of, really coming up through male-dominated industries as a woman
Yeah.
and what that has looked like and what that has yeah, how that's affected you. And we talked, in our initial conversation, we talked about that piece of internalized misogyny and misogyny in the workplace, and how that really shows up even
Mm.
when you get out of it, right? And so this is another place where um being in the financial services industry, it is heavily male dominated. It's still, less than 20% of women are financial advisors. It's it's tough out there. And so, one of the reasons I've told this story several times on the podcast, one of the reasons that I left the place where I was because I did not feel that I could be myself in that space. And I was masking so much of myself so much of the time that it's like I'm not even me in this area, right? Like I can't even be me at work. Um I can't be feminine and also smart and like all of those they didn't they say you can, but in practice you can't. Right. Like when it comes to actually being given a partnership role, actually being paid as much as your male peers, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, there's so many, like I could just think of so many things that tie into that. And like what's interesting is I went to boarding school. It was very liberal in the sense that it was like a woman could be anything. You're going to be, like you're going to take over the world, kind of very supportive. And it was a co-ed school, right? So I was used to men and boys who could support the concept that me as a woman could be able to do whatever I wanted and that equality was an acceptable thing. And then I went in and when I started working at Merrill Lynch, really I had gone in thinking I was only going to be there a year. I ended up spending in total, I think, almost 14 years. But the thing is I guess I think I went in with that young naivete. And for me, I don't, around probably 80 days in of working for them, that was thrown out the window instantly. And, I would hear like kind of the sexist remarks and okay, right, we deal with those. However, it was late at the end of the day, and I had come out of a meeting and I went and I found my desk wallpapered with centerfold pictures. And I was floored. And there were all these men just standing there watching, giggling like little schoolboys. And, at that point, the harassment, I mean, I couldn't believe it. Like we're grown adults. And I remember having a conversation with my mom and dad about it that night. And what was so interesting, my dad was like, if you report it, if you tell management, you could lose your job. Like, are you ready for the fallout? And my mom was like, just keep your mouth shut. Just keep your
Mm.
mouth shut. Don't say anything, Margaret. And I was just like, what I learned in that moment, what I now look back and realize, like that was her internalized misogyny being passed on down to me because that's how she had survived. And well, being myself that I didn't keep my mouth shut and I went to management about it. And I think that I have to be honest, we happened to have a female manager at that point. If all of my managers were men, I don't know if I would have done it. I
Mm.
just don't know. I was young at that point. Um, I guess I would say young and attractive. And of the managers we had, she was the only manager who hadn't hit on me. And so I think had it been a situation where like every man hit on me or that would have been a little bit more intimidating to be like, I think this is wrong. But when I did go in, she was just like, this is going to be uncomfortable. And I said, well, I'm prepared. And she's like, we're not going to, you're not going to get fired. I can protect you on that. But she's like, it's going to get rough. And it did. It got really rough. The top producers called, wanted me to be fired. I got harassed even more. I mean, one of the guys who got in trouble for it, his wife actually called me and was just, she scolded me for not taking it better. And I was just like, what is wrong? And I have to say, like, I then got lucky and got onto a team and had a little bit of protection. But I also learned that on that team, that was another type of experiencing the misogyny, right? And it was interesting when I was doing my graduate work, there was a book we read called Sex in the Forbidden Zone. And the person who I was a junior partner to, he was a great guy, and I don't think he realized what he was doing. And in no way, I need to say this, he in no way was flirting with me or trying anything sexual, but what he would do was come up behind me and put his hand on my shoulder and be like, "How's that work coming?" And he'd just pat on my shoulder and be like, and you could feel the pressure, and it's like, "Okay, I get you're the boss. Thanks." And, our branch manager used to walk around the branch with a baseball bat in his hand, smacking his hand, saying, "Are you going to hit your numbers?" And he'd stand in front of your desk, smacking this bat in front of his hand, be like, "Are you going to hit your numbers?" And I'm like, "And does the bat make it happen faster?" I'm
Right.
just, right? It was crazy stuff like that. And I think the workplace in general was more tolerant back then. But it it definitely was a hostile space for women. And I ended up being out of that office, came the first woman to file suit against Merrill Lynch, and she actually went it alone. She did not join a class action suit. It was before the class action suit. And I was called in to be an expert witness, but also give testimony to what I experienced, because it ended up not just being, the the Playboys or the hustlers on your desk, right? Um, we both got cut out of accounts we should have been receiving in distributions. There were meetings, there were things that we should have been pulled into because of our LOS. And for me in that office, I worked at two different Merrill Lynch offices. In that office was the first time I was sexually assaulted in the workplace. And the man that sexually assaulted me is the district manager today with Merrill. And years later, when I did get called in to testify for her, I was in a different office. And I had not only the office managers, but the district managers all come visit me and tell me how I should just keep it to a minimum unless I wanted retribution.
Wow.
And so, and by that point, I was drowning in misogyny, but that was the tipping point that made me say it's time I leave. Because when you're basically threatening me to keep my mouth shut and say like it's going to get worse than what it is, at that point, I was again drowning in misogyny at that point. And I think that that's one of the things that I can say is, having worked for them for so long at that point, I had been with them over a decade. I had experienced things like when I had uterine cancer and had a hysterectomy, I had flowers sent to me and the card said, "Aren't you glad," from a manager, "Hope you feel better soon. Aren't you glad your career's not going to be derailed by a baby?"
Oh,
Um, then when I got engaged, and I got engaged later, right? Like I wasn't even going to change my name. I was 30 years old. Um, and I had, I was asked, "You have a really good practice and, you generate a lot of commissions. Are you going to quit when you get married? Because we need to know who to give your book to."
yikes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've experienced a decent amount along the way, but I think one of the things that I don't think women realize, and that is what's okay and what's not okay.
Right.
Um, And I think the hard part is it's so subtle, right? Because you want to be, and they harass you into accepting it. And that's the other part is, well, I mean, what's the big deal? Why do you have to make such a big deal about it? I mean, it was just a little comment, right? And
Well, I don't think what's funny when you say that is like when we look back at it in the moment, we convince ourselves that it's subtle. But
right.
when we look back and talk about it,
Mhm.
it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That was such a humongous red flag. And again, I'm going to use that same word. I normalized it
Oh,
so that
yeah.
I could feel um, some sense of safety, some sense of like, I can control this. I'm like, I can be okay with this so that I can feel okay here.
I love what you just said, some sense of safety, because a perfect example is I learned not so much in the first office, but when I moved to the second office, one of the things I learned very quickly, because the men were very handsy, and I learned things like, okay, I can't get on the elevator with this person because, you know, or I need to wear this if I'm going to be in a meeting with these other brokers today. So, like you navigated the world, like I didn't even realize how my head shifted to make the world safe. But one of the things that, um, and this is where I would say the internalized misogyny really took a hefty toll, was I realized that I was going to constantly be preyed on and seen as less than unless I separated and pushed myself away from being like other women. And so, wow, my mantra was, I'm not like other women.
Yeah.
I would have just been, I mean, I should have just screamed, hello, internalized misogyny, I'm drowning,
Yep.
you know. Um, and I prided myself not being like other women. And essentially, I became the biggest jerk, like all the like I became the biggest jerk like all the guys essentially. And I essentially learned that I had to, in order to be able to be included on deals that I wanted to be in on, in order to be able to get any distribution. And I should have been getting like top distribution because I was performing very, like I was top of my LOS and I was actually doing better than people LOSs ahead of me and things like that. And I got, I got the message loud and clear, be a man, act like a man.
Yep.
And I also figured out the more I acted like a man, the less I got preyed on.
Mm.
And so the more I became a jerk, the more I became like them, the less attractive I was as a woman to them to prey on. And so I learned all these coping skills so that I would be seen as one of them, not be seen as who I was. And um, it took years to undo that. And I'll be really honest, it's not like one or two. I mean, I carried a lot of resentment and it affected my personal lives. It affected how I saw men in general, for decades.
Hmm. Yeah, this aspect of, I'm not like other girls. That was a safety blanket for me too. Where I was the only female advisor in a team of like 10 in our office. Um, and every other there were a lot of women on staff. No other female advisors though. And I have three brothers. So I used that. I used that as a shield of, yeah, I get along better with guys anyway. This is just, it's totally normal for me. I'm, like one of the guys. I can, drink whiskey with the best of them, right? Like all of it, right? It's like, yeah, I love, I do. There are bourbons that I really enjoyed the taste of, but now, I mean, I haven't
Yeah.
drank very much in the last like couple of years, and whiskey now tastes like whiskey as far as like it burns, right? Like, oh, been resensitized.
I think that, to say that my feminine energy was wounded was an understatement. It was demolished.
Yeah.
And it also wounded my masculine energy.
Yeah.
And so I just became this person who knew how to function in these high concentration men's worlds, right? But I didn't know that there were other options than to be like that. And I know this sounds kind of funny, but I do my binging of Netflix. And recently I was watching Madam Secretary, and it's in the last section when she's president, and they keep trying to make her be president like a man. And she says, just let me lead like a woman. Let me be a female president. And I think that, like, if there's anything, like when she said that, I just like, oh, it hit me to the like core of my soul, because it was like, let me do my job with the skills I am best at. And the sad thing is that of the 19 skills that they've identified are great skills for leaders to have, women outscore men in 17 of them. I mean, it's tremendous. And the thing is yet we tried to change who we were to be like them so they could feel comfortable.
Right. And so
And
and so we could feel safe,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
That
no,
it's
it was. And I think that, like, people ask me, oh, well, if it was so bad, why didn't you leave? And I'm like, really? I was, when it was really bad, right? When I felt it, I was under the age of 30, making six figures, living like my clients, I dealt with, high net worth and ultra high net worth clients. I was meeting my clients on private jets. They owned professional sports teams. Like, where was I just going to go walk away and replicate that? And the other thing is like, guilty as charged. I built a life that was, that supported that, right? Like,
yeah.
so, where was I? And for me, I was single. So where was I going to go replace that dollar amount? And the reality is what were my skills at that point in financial services industry?
Right.
I mean, if I changed companies, I mean, I watched women do it. I watched them change and have the illusion or the delusion that, oh, if I go here, it's going to be better, but it never was.
Mm-mm.
It never was. And so I figured I might as well stay where I was. I'd figured out the game, right? Um, and and so I stayed for, over a decade. And it really was for me just, I so admire you for leaving and acknowledging it wasn't sitting right with you, because I don't even think I had that capacity at that point. I was just so, this is life.
Mm. That was, it's interesting. It's interesting because part of the reason that I left is because I wasn't making six figures.
Yeah.
And I knew that the assets I was managing, the skills that I brought to the table, um, would anywhere else, if I was anywhere else, they were worth a lot of money. But I was being so undervalued in the place I was at, right? While also understanding the numbers of what I was doing, of what I was managing, of what they were making off of what I was managing, of what they were saving because they weren't even paying me for the financial planning work that I was still doing for the rest of the practice, right? So I'm still writing plans for the other advisors and managing a book of business worth many millions of dollars, bringing in new clients, like sitting with, like rehabilitating relationships with other clients that had been passed around to other advisors. And that was, I knew it. I knew my skill set. The other thing that I didn't lose, that I'm so grateful for, is my ability to connect with people. Right. And so I knew the entire time I worked there that I had an ability to connect with clients that none of the other advisors did, because they wouldn't even listen to their questions, right? They would like hear a question and then answer whatever it is that they wanted to answer. And I would sit there in the meeting and be like, you didn't actually answer their question. Like that answer you just gave didn't actually respond to what she asked,
Right.
constantly, right? And so I would talk to them, I would answer their questions. People would like very often cry in my office, right? Because it's like money is emotional. Money
Oh,
is like there's so much weight to it, and I created the safe space where they could feel safe to be expressed. And so I knew that, I realized how special that was. So I didn't lose that, but everywhere else, I was a very much harder version of myself.
I mean, definitely, and I mean, relationships, I mean, I got married while I was at Merrill, and I got divorced while I was at Merrill. I didn't get married until after 30. And For me, I mean, I worked these tremendous hours, and um it's still, I guess, I felt like I had to work double as hard. And when you talk about not getting paid your worth, I think I was blessed in the sense that at that time we weren't doing the financial plans. right? Like
Mm.
I was a CFP, but Merrill had a program and, they wanted you to send it off and do their program and blah, 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 blah. So that worked. But I will tell you, I think where you could see like these are my skills and I'm not being paid for it. I could see where I was missing account distribution, but I have to say, and it pains me to say this, I sacrificed more of me to make sure I got the dollars. And it was not, I mean, do you want to stay on this account and get your distribution? And I didn't get the fair distribution. I had a couple of big clients that I shared with other brokers. My payout should have been much more than it was, but it was still a good payout. On the same token, I was expected to take clients to strip clubs. I was told like if we were trying to get more money out of a client, they tell me what they'd want me to wear that day. And, like it or not, you don't, I was young and I think, I hate to say it. And I really, this is not for me to say this. I'm saying this for other women. Once you start to dissociate, once you start to make that dissociation, it's not even about it being a slippery slope. The reality is you just don't feel stuff anymore. And so when someone's, when I tell somebody like, yeah, I put on whatever they, if they said like wear this dress or this suit because we get more money that way, or I'm going to drop the pencil. And when I drop it, don't like squat down to pick it up. Please bend over to pick it up. Right. You're like, at that point, you're like, I'm right now, in your head, you don't think much of it when you're thinking, can I go in the closet to get that mutual fund prospectus if that person's in there? Like that was literally my everyday navigation, right? So if it's navigating like who can I go in the prospectus closet with or who can I get in an elevator with, someone saying to me, hey, we're gonna have this meeting tomorrow with so and so, we're gonna try and grab another, 10 million. Think you could wear that suit that he likes? I mean, you're like, why? Why not? I mean, I'm going to titty bars, right? So I think that was for me where um I had locked away my worth.
Mm.
And I had shut down. And the hard part, yeah, I was cold. I was cold. And it took years to thaw. And that is my biggest advice I would say to women who haven't gotten to the place. Like if you're experiencing any of this and you haven't gotten to the place where you're detached, where you're cold, run now because
Yeah.
it did not get any better. And again, it's Hannah, why I love that you had the courage to leave. And I don't know that it wasn't that I didn't have courage. I had shut down and I didn't know any better. And I was so wounded in both my masculine and my feminine energy that I was just a functioning, happy being on the outside with a beautiful clown face of a smile, dying on the inside, and just being that rat on a wheel that went one foot in front of the other. And, it takes a long time when you get to that place to undo it.
Yeah.
Um, and that is something that I will say, like I worked with a coach with, and I worked with a man with, and I didn't think I was going to work with him on healing my misogyny, but I realized how much, he's like, we're not going to get anywhere unless you can trust me as a man.
Right.
And, and I was like, oh. And so we went in and we unpacked a lot of what happened. And I used to take great pride that I was cold and a jerk and like all of those guys, right? Like I took pride in it, but it was really the internalized misogyny. And I truly want to, if there's anything I can convey to women, and that is there is a space for you to be your strongest, best feminine self. And who that is beautiful and it is very valuable,
Hmm.
very valuable. And I think that's so hard to see because, still in the workplace, women are marginalized. Women are not seen as equals. I mean, years later, when I went to work for another firm and I came in at the same time two men were coming in, I was more qualified and they got paid more. And when I said, why are they getting paid more? I'm the one who deserves the bigger paycheck. And they're like, yes, but you don't have a spouse and children to support. I'm like, excuse me? Excuse me? I'm just because I didn't pop out a baby doesn't make my skills less worthy. Just because I'm divorced because I've been addicted to my job and I've destroyed my marriage, right? But it was, and it wouldn't have mattered if I was married or had kids. It wouldn't have mattered because they
Yeah.
still weren't going to see me as the breadwinner who needed to make more, right? And
Wow.
so it took me, it took me three promotions to get my paycheck to where their paycheck was when we came in. And when I say I was overqualified, I don't mean by a little, I mean significantly. And, I mean, that wasn't that long ago. And I think that that's just the thing that, you know, we're not taught to negotiate our worth. We're not taught, hey, this is the range for the job. I've got all this experience and I deserve that top of the range. We're not taught to ask for raises. We're not taught to, I mean, I think in the brokerage industry, somewhere like in a commission situation, right? Like the commission is what it is, and thank goodness, right? Your
Right.
3%, like that's not going to change. Now there's things around those relationships that can change. But I do believe that it's kind of like with little kids. Okay, I'm going to say this. Um, if you go into a work environment, realizing you've got 2-year-olds around you and you have to set the boundaries and you set how they respect you, it's a different place. If you go in, let me check out the landscape. Let me just kind of see how it is. And then, oh, sure, I'll do this for you. Sure, I'll do this for you. Before you realize it, it's a lost cause. Like this like girls being nice, right? Like being, I don't see some of the stuff I do. If somebody asks me to do something, I'm just like, sure, I'll do it. Whatever. I'm just being nice to you. I'm not in my head thinking I'm giving away power, but we are. But we are. And I think that that's one of the biggest lessons I've had to learn in the long term is how many little things we do that give away our power. And I just can't stress this enough. Once you give a little bit away, number one, they're going to want more. Number two, good luck getting it back.
Hmm.
Good luck getting it back.
Right.
I mean, it's just like once I started to make copies one time because I thought, oh, I'm not doing anything right now. I mean, I can go, like I was done for the day. They had a ton of stuff to do. Sure, I'll just go make your copies. Then I got asked again and again and again, right? And it's like, no, 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 have so and so do it. I'm not your administrative assistant, right? I was just doing you a favor.
Right.
What? Oh, they're not here. Could you go do this? And you don't realize it. It's those subtle ways that you give up power. Um, and yeah, I mean, own your feminine energy and own your boundaries. Own your boundaries.
Yeah, I think, and I love this whole subject. I talk a lot about feminine and masculine energy, and we have on the podcast a lot of different times. But again, never with this lens of like looking at your own internalized misogyny, because this understanding the power of feminine leadership, leading from a space of collaboration, right? This is what feminine leadership means, leading from collaboration, leading from a place of empathy, leading from a place of um, wanting everyone to be
Right.
in the best place possible, right? It's not I win, you lose, right? That is what we're talking about with the power of feminine leadership. It is collaborative. I would be super interested, Margaret, in that list, if you can share the list of, leadership qualities. Um, that I think that would be fascinating to look at, that you were saying before that women,
Yeah.
score so highly on. But we have to in these spaces, and so this is what, kind of what we're talking about today, this the masculine in so many male dominated industries, the masculine leadership is unhealthy leadership, right? Not that masculine energy is unhealthy. It's
It,
that it's in, when we
not
say
about the masculine energy. It is not. It
right,
is about poor behaviors that have been reinforced and they think they're just too freaking lazy to change. I feel like there's one thing I want to share because this to me was a life-changing event to hear this. And I feel like whether you are a woman wanting to go into leadership, whether you are a woman having challenges with leadership, I can't stress this enough. So there are plenty of books about boundaries. I just mentioned it. We all talk about setting boundaries. But one of the key things I never knew that I learned, and again, it was game changing for me, and that is you cannot set boundaries from a place of fear.
Mm,
So, what that means is if you have any kind of defense wall up, if you have any kind of, as Brene Brown would say, armor on,
yeah.
can't set boundaries. You have to be sitting in vulnerability to set a boundary. That is not about boundaries for other people, that is a boundary for yourself. And keep in mind, boundaries are about you, not them. Boundaries say, this is what I can do. This is the point to which I need this environment so I can show up as my best self, right? And so I think that as much as we say, like, embrace your feminine energy and sit in that feminine power, I want to preface it by saying, you may not be able to if you are coming from a place of fear, if you are coming from a place where you have a lot of internalized misogyny, any internalized misogyny. But if you are, I think that's one of the things that I would say is if, because I hear plenty of coaches and therapists say, oh, set boundaries. And I'm just like, it's not that simple. And we don't tell people that. We
Yeah.
just don't tell them. So um, if you're struggling to set boundaries, you need to start looking inward because to me, when I'm in a position where I don't set boundaries, two things pop to mind. I'm dissociating, or I've got walls up or armor on, and therefore I can't set boundaries for me or anybody else around me. And so that is one of the things that then you got to turn inward. You got to turn inward. And the most counterintuitive thing is to turn to vulnerability when you feel you're being attacked. When
Hmm.
the one thing, I think that's the one quality that we as women get attacked for is being vulnerable, being sensitive, right? And the thing is it takes far more courage to be vulnerable than it does to be armored.
Yep.
Fact. And so when I see um, these men who are struggling with it, they struggle with their vulnerability. And that's a hard conversation to have.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
such it's such a hard thing to see it, like we've been talking about, to see it when you're in it. Um and when we get to pull out, if you have an outside perspective, right? Or if you start to notice, I know for me, we've talked a little bit about this. Like I was feeling very strongly like I cannot be myself here. They don't know who I am. They don't know what I'm supposed to be. Right. And so there was this like deep knowing after a lot of other stuff that happened that people have heard about. Or if you haven't, you can go back and listen to more podcasts. It's all in there. But I knew that I couldn't be me in that place. And so I had to leave. I had to differentiate myself. I had to separate myself from that, that energy basically so that I could deconstruct what I had learned, right? And then build a practice that actually felt good to me, in a way that felt true to me. And it has been, it was definitely years, a good couple years of a lot of deconstructing from the again the masculine way that I was taught, knowing that it didn't feel good because again it was unhealthy masculine. It was not healthy, right? It was the unhealthy sides of both. And so when we get to step into the healthy feminine and the healthy feminine flow, the healthy masculine structure, right? When we can build that inside for ourselves, that's when we can hold the space for others as well. That's when other people feel safe around us. too.
And I will say this, and Brene Brown has said this, like it's not something a whole lot of women have been doing.
Mm.
And to be able to create that space, if you are a woman who has done her work, then you can create a space for other women and other men. But quite often, women don't, they think they've done some work, they've maybe done some healing, but they truly haven't gotten in there and done that heavy lifting so that they can live in abundance. And
Yeah.
I will just say that you will know when that shift occurs in you, when you are no longer sitting in a wounded feminine or masculine energy, and it like the world just changes.
Yeah.
And it sounds crazy, but even when things are really tough, they seem okay.
Yes.
And that is where we don't leave jobs that are toxic because we're afraid, right? And to me, the thing, I love that quote, like the thing that you're avoiding is the message that you're not wanting to hear, right? So that's the work you need doing. That's where the happiness lives, is in that thing you're avoiding. And I couldn't believe leaving Merrill Lynch was an option. Like it took me years to believe that there was an option to leave. And I have to say I'm a little older, but I think that for many of us still, we don't see the world as full of options and endless opportunities and abundance, right? We we get kind of told, well, you can do this, right? And we don't even realize we fall into settling, you know? And I love seeing all of the other women who don't accept it, right? Having a coach who's in the NHL or the NFL and it's a woman, go. Like she never saw those limitations that I saw, right? And the thing is sometimes we get limited because, we fall in love and we have kids or we get married. And, it's not things that we think that are going to do that to us. But the biggest thing I can say is for you to truly find your happiness and your peace, you have to make yourself the priority. And you have to invest as hard in you as you do anybody else around you. And when you sit in that space, you can, like you said, create those places for other people. But you can also then create a life of abundance for yourself, doing whatever you want, wherever you want. And I know that sounds really lofty and pie in the sky. But I see that as, as someone who has been able to do that, and I sit here and I look at you. You've been able to leave, right? That security that we told. Oh, if I'm sure you were told, if you leave,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
never going to make it, right? Like they want you codependent on them. That's the other
Absolutely.
part, right? Like I think the thing about misogyny that people don't talk about, and that is it's about building codependence.
Mm.
And so, because as long as you're codependent on them, then they have power,
Right.
right? So, it's not just about tearing you down, making you feel less than, but they want you codependent. And your brain will go there, right? Especially, I hate to say it, if you've had any attachment issues and unhealthy childhood, good luck.
Right.
Like you've already got a deck stacked against you. But thing is that you can change all that. And I think it's about surrounding yourself with women who've been there, surrounding yourself with women who've said, no, it doesn't have to be this way, or I waited too long. Learn from me. How can I support you so you can do that now and not after you have 10 more years of damage like I did?
Oh, yeah. And it's so many industries too, right? And I identify with, what you mentioned earlier of, feeling like all options were available to you. I received those messages too. I was a very smart child. I was extremely hardworking. Doors were open to me. I could be whatever I wanted. I could be whatever I dreamed of being. I could go for what I wanted to go for. And so I received those messages too. And then it was the struggle within that to realize that full potential. And so what I what I love and what I love helping women with, I love that you help women with, is how do I be more of me How do I bring my fullness to the table? Not masking, not hiding, not again, not pretending to be more masculine to, to fit in. How can I just be me? How can I just be me and know that that's exactly what I'm supposed to be? Um, and it's so much easier. It's I can't tell you how much easier it is. It's so much better. So much better.
I think the biggest thing I can say is most of us didn't have safe spaces in our lives to be what to truly embrace ourselves as women, to embrace all of our skills and our talents and our uniqueness and truly shine in that power because feminine energy is super powerful when you are just in it. And hence there's a reason why someone wants to take it away from you, FYI, because it is so powerful. But I think that truly, from what I have seen, is that the only way you heal and really gain your power back that you were born with is you surround yourself with women who've done the work. You find a woman who can create a safe space for you to be able to take down the armor. Um, and it can be a man, I happen to be, I think for me, I was blessed in that one of the coaches that I worked with was a man, and I needed to have that experience with him because of I think it was just so intense, my internalized misogyny. Um, but I think like that's one of the things that I truly try to make like my mission in every day, right? Whether it's with a client, whether it's just a woman I come across, or, earlier today I was talking to a gentleman and his wife is afraid, that she's got the gene for breast cancer and should she get a prophylactic surgery? I've done that. I've gone on that route. And I was like, have her call me. He's like, no, you don't even know her. I mean, I'm like, here's my cell phone. Like, we will talk
Mm.
because I don't want any woman to feel like there's not a safe space for her to be seen, to be supported, to be okay just as she is. Because I think that is the greatest disservice our culture as a whole says is you as who you are not enough. Make yourself prettier, make yourself thinner, make yourself more pickable by a man, you know? And it's to me this crime against us as women. And so to be able to have places where you as a woman can say, me just how I am, my hot, messy self is enough. And I feel safe taking down all the armor so that I can explore that hot, messy self so she can become stronger. That's truly the beautiful place. And that's where real growth and change can happen.
Mm. And Margaret, if someone is hearing this and wants to find out more about how to work with you, how does she do that?
Yeah. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. You can go to my website. It's simply margaretdebryan.com. I'm on Instagram. You might hunt me down on TikTok, but I don't know.
I'm on TikTok. I love
I'm
TikTok.
like, how do I say this? I won't be doing any dancing on TikTok. It's probably not as professional on TikTok. I'm just gonna say that. You might see like a cat or a dog flying through the air in those. But yeah, I mean, reach out. I think those are probably the easiest ways. Or my email simply is margaret@margaretdebryan.com. So if you can, get my name down, that's great. But yeah, I mean, I'm easy to find on most social media platforms.
Beautiful. And all of those different ways to connect with you will be linked in the show notes. So, of course, if you're listening, you can always head down there and grab those links, connect with Margaret on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, wherever, and just check out the different things that she's working on. I know you've got a few really great offerings that you're helping women with right now.
Yeah, so one of the things I have is called Thrive Hive, and it's actually based on that belief. I believe women should have a community. So Thrive Hive is a community for women. In it, there's kind of two components to it. But in the free component, there's a workshop in there. Also, my book club is in there. I do a weekly book club. and it's just for women. And I tell people it's the easiest book club you could ever be in because I summarize the reading so you don't even have to read, just show up and have fun. But then, so within Thrive Hive, there's also some more advanced stuff in there, and there's a support group in there for self-worth and confidence. That's in the elite model. And then I do, of course, one-on-one coaching. And then for this, we're coming in, we're around that new year, new you kind of time. So for individuals, I do have a 5-session coaching program, and it's all around business clarity and vision so that you are ready to take, the new year and run with it. And it's not just, like, let's talk about vision and walk away. I mean, it's goals, it's accountability, it's action plans, it's a lot.
Beautiful. Well, Margaret, thank you so much for being here with me today. There's always, I always feel that like professional sisterhood, with other women who have been through the fire of financial services for sure. And so I appreciate being able to talk with you and hear your story and, really help uplift others who are going through something similar, who are experiencing it now, because it's not different now, right? In these big places, in law, in financial services, in tech, there are so many spaces where this is still happening, and it doesn't have to. There
No,
are other ways.
and I am going to say this. I do think it's going to actually get bumpier in the near future.
Mm,
I think I'd like to think we've gone forward. But I have to say that the more we pull away to, diversity programs, inclusion programs, the more we are accepting of men's bad behavior in our society, um, in our culture, the more it's going to start happening in the workplace and the more challenging it's going to be. On the same note, please don't let that discourage you, and don't stop fighting, and don't stop demanding what you deserve, because there are women in places that we never could have imagined women could have jobs.
yeah.
And yeah, you deserve everything you want. Just fight for it. Just fight for it. And it doesn't have to be a grinding fight, but here's my best advice: fight for it with amazing supporters behind you, cheerleading you the whole way.
Hmm. Absolutely. I endorse that message. Thank you, Margaret. It was so great to be with you today.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough, you are enough, and your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.